Okay, time for us to watch some Benny S. Okay, we're some good old Benny S. Not just Sleepy Jack, kind of sick Jack. Had to get out of here. All
So
right.
here's an example. Here's a great example of people propagating information that just is not true and then reversing themselves willy-nilly. So for months, we heard that if you opened schools, it was a disaster.
Maybe.
Mostly we heard that from a media that was convinced that Trump had to be wrong about everything. Because Trump was out there saying, you need to open the schools. This is silly. It's bad. It's hurting kids. And teachers' unions were saying, no, we need to keep the schools closed. And for months, the media were like, you know what? Trump's the worst, man. Let's keep those schools closed. We don't know how dangerous it's going to be. It could kill little kids. We don't know. Doesn't matter. The stats show that little kids are not dying of this. It still could kill little kids, right? It's deeply, deeply dangerous. And then people take that to heart. And this leads to footage like this footage. This is from Oregon, of a teacher stopping an anti-lockdown protester to scream and shout like a crazy person because she is very upset that people are protesting against lockdowns. And she's talking about how her parents' family...
3,000 people died yesterday, Ben. In places where they opened up the school system, children can act as vectors to infect other people, Ben. And on top of that, yeah, there is a chance that they could develop life-threatening complications, Ben. This is a dumb argument.
Her kids' families are dying of COVID and how she's at risk. Here's a little bit of that footage.
Teachers are also at risk. So when children become vectors for a deadly pandemic, yeah, it's dangerous to be a teacher in schools. You're already underpaid.
Yeah, that sort of hysteria. I mean, that is hysteria. There's no other way to put it.
That sort of hysteria. It's like the kids she teaches have families losing loved ones. It's like they're losing their parents. Like, what is this? What is this? Yeah, she's seeing the effects of a society where we've lost, like, what is it now? It's up to 300,000 people who have died. And like 3,000 people per day are dying now. Like I love that Ben Shapiro is just like openly arguing like, hysteria over the same amount of hysteria over losing a 9/11's worth of people every day. Like, we're fucking losing a 9/11's worth of people every day. We're losing a terrorist attack worth of people every day from a deadly pandemic that could be prevented or slowed down by lockdowns. That's why she's upset at these people who are protesting their right to infect others and put them at risk. Yeah, we've been at war for 2 decades because of one 9/11. Now we're getting them every day.
That sort of hysteria is utterly unjustified, but it's been pushed by teachers' unions and by the media. The Chicago's teachers' union over the weekend tweeted out, it's got 28,000 members. They tweeted out, quote, "The push to reopen schools is rooted in sexism, racism, and misogyny." Sexism, racism, and misogyny.
Yeah, you could make really good arguments for all three of these. Here, I'll do it right now. Sexism. You know why? Because teachers are seen as more feminine. Teachers are seen as more prone to caring for children. You want to reopen schools. That puts women at risk, you know? On top of that, racism. The punishment of the working class during this pandemic has been nothing less than absolutely cruel. And you know who makes up the majority of the working class? Or at the very least, a very large chunk of the working class? Black people. So there's definitely an element of racism there. You know, misogyny as well.
Sexism, racism, and misogyny, right? This has been the narrative of the left. It's been the narrative of the media. So why exactly would we trust the media when it comes to either shutting down or reopening? Because here is now the editorial board of the Washington Post coming along in December, right in the middle of the worst outbreak that we've seen thus far. An editorial.
Well, I mean, there is an element of, like, schools being seen as more feminine and teachers being saddled with the burden of, on top of being teachers, also being rearers of children, and they need to provide for the children. Like, there's an element here of, like, that's why we expect teachers to buy school supplies for kids. Like, it's really fucked up. And it's because we have those additional thoughts because of women, because we expect women to do more. And also, women have been disproportionately affected because women make up a large section of the service industry as well.
Editorial board that was like, we're not sure about this whole school thing. We're not, Here is the editorial board of the Washington Post. What could have changed in the last month? Could there have been an election or something? Because here's the new headline. Students have already lost too much time. They need to be back in classrooms. Oh, weird. Because those of us who were saying this months ago were castigated and are still being castigated by the teachers.
Wait, what was...
We're castigated and are back in classrooms. Here is the editorial board of the Washington Post. What could have changed?
He did say the Washington Post, right? Oh, here we go. God damn it. Oh, it's an opinion piece. Wow, let's wait. Is that... What else have they said about children in schools? Wait, here. I have a better plan. Children, schools, Washington Post editorial board. Oh, weird. Months ago, schools need to reopen. The question is how. From back in July. Weird. Weird how Ben is pushing this as like it's an inconsistent, hypocritical position for the Washington Post board to take when they've actually been very consistent since the beginning. Probably because the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who has a vested interest in keeping kids in school so that his workers can keep coming to work. Weird. So strange.
Changed in the last month. Could there have been an election or something? Because here's the new headline. Students have already lost too much time. They need to be back in classrooms. Oh, weird. Because those of us who were saying this months ago were castigated and are still being castigated by the teachers' unions as people who don't care about the lives of teachers who are bad, uncaring, unfeeling evil. Now here's the Washington Post that was propagating a lot of this panic porn for months.
They were also saying that schools needed to reopen, Ben. Did you not do your homework on this, Ben? Because it literally took me like 5 seconds to check this, Ben.
On end. And they're like, you know what? It's time for kids to go back to school. Yeah, no bleep, Sherlock. But you think I'm going to trust you on that? Wrongo.
Did he?
Not going to trust you.
Whoa. Did he just bleep himself and then roll his R's? What? Why?
Post that was propagating a lot of this panic porn for months on end. And they're like, you know what? It's time for kids to go back to school. Yeah, no bleep, Sherlock. But you think I'm going
Just say shit. Just say it. You have people who can edit a bleep in, Ben, if you really need one.
to trust you on that? Wrongo. Not going to trust you on that. I'm going to trust people who've been fairly consistent throughout this whole thing, looking for reasonable measures. But here comes the Washington Post, and why, look at that. They think Joe Biden was elected president, and now they've reversed themselves on schooling. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, teachers, principals, administrators, and parents across the U.S. have worked mightily to help students keep learning. Students develop new curricula, schools develop new curricula, provided children with portable computers, labored to give some semblance of structure to remote learning. Even with these efforts, remote learning has failed to provide anything approaching the quality of education.
Hey, how though? If you want to, I would love it if you could provide like one of the mods, like send them a whisper of like a case of somebody being arrested and like charged with misgendering someone. Because I haven't seen evidence of that. If you can provide that to me, I'd appreciate it.
That can be delivered by a teacher in a classroom. It's clear that there are pernicious effects of keeping children out of schools. We recently asked a top official in a Washington area jurisdiction who insisted on anonymity why there wasn't more of a push to figure out ways to return children to the classroom. The answer was there was no political pressure. Parents of means can give their kids the help and resources they need or switch them to a private school. Parents of minority or disadvantaged students with the most to lose have the least clouts. Well, maybe it's because you in the media didn't do your damn jobs on the COVID pandemic all the way from the beginning, and you're still not doing your job.
No, the people who had less money still had less clout before, Ben. What part about that don't you understand? People with less money have less economic options in this situation. And they did before the pandemic, and they have less now too.
You're still not doing your job. Okay, you continue to purvey the panic porn that suggests that everybody is equally likely to die of this virus. You keep suggesting over and over that full-scale lockdowns that are completely hypocritical in their actual application are totally fine. When's the last time, by the way, you saw a business owner who'd been completely destroyed on CNN or MSNBC? You only see it on Fox News. You only hear about that from my show or shows like it. You won't hear it in the media. But this is the media that asks you to trust them? This is the same media that's blaming Trump for lack of COVID relief. Well, now Nancy Pelosi has completely flipped on COVID relief, and nobody in the media will even notice it. So Nancy Pelosi, who has held up a COVID relief package for months on end for no apparent political reason other than to get beyond the election.
Well, they've been pretty steadfast on this. The reason it's been getting held up is because Mitch McConnell wants to provide protections so that you can't sue your employer or your family can't sue your employer if they cause you through negligence to die from COVID-19. They want to give legal immunity to businesses. That's the thing that is now holding up the relief package. And it's both from Republicans and Democrats. Republicans and Democrats have agreed on this package. It's mostly just Mitch McConnell who really, really wants those COVID protections for businesses.
Because she thought it would hurt Trump. Now she says we're not leaving Washington, D.C. without the relief. And the media are like, oh, look at that, Nancy Pelosi, leader. It's incredible. Here's Nancy Pelosi being a giant hypocrite.
We have to have an omnibus, and we're hoping that that will accelerate.
Oh, and to be clear, Nancy Pelosi is a giant hypocrite. That is true.
The discussions on the omnibus. We are going to keep government open. You know, we're not going to have a continuing resolution, but we need to take the time to do that. And then, as I said, we saw a framework. They're putting, now they have to turn it into text. And then, so we'll take the time we need, and we must get it done. And we must get it done by before we leave. We cannot leave without it.
I mean, and the media just went right along with this. The media are just like, oh, look at that, Nancy Pelosi, leader. Yeah, I trust you guys. I trust you guys on COVID. I trust you guys on COVID relief. I trust you guys on voter fraud. Or I don't trust you on any of this stuff. It is your lack.
Yes, you can all you can trust is me, Ben Shapiro, and also Fox News, the most watched media newscast in the world. Yeah, the number one rated Fox News for mainstream media. You can only trust me, Ben Shapiro, and Alex Jones to tell you the truth.
Lack of credibility that has led to a rise of radical, almost deconstructionist skepticism in the very
Whoa. We just had word that someone in my mill tested positive for COVID yesterday. Higher-ups knew last week, never told any of the workers. That's wild. But also that's the kind of stuff where, like, now if people die in your mill, it's because those higher ups didn't want to tell any of you or use better protections for you or do any of the stuff that would actually help you. And if one of you dies because of this COVID outbreak, you should be able to sue the fuck out of those, like, clowns who wanted to keep you working in order so that they could make more money. That's ridiculous.
Notion that there is such a thing as a fact or truth. Now, there are a lot of people in the media who've said we live in a post-truth era. Yeah, you create...
Well, how though? You do have free speech. You can say the N-word. You can say the fuck word. You can say these words. There are just going to be consequences for you. Free speech just means the government can't censor you. And guess what? You can say whatever the fuck you want. You can say the fuck word. You can say the N-word. But there are social costs associated with that because other people can use their free speech too.
You created the post-truth era. If you want revision of that era, if you want to go back,
I don't think he meant fuck.
How about this?
Okay, yeah. On second thought, you probably meant faggot. Okay, I gotcha. I can say that because I am one. Yes.
How about you be the skeptics? And I mean that you need to actually check your own side. Ask tough questions of Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden. And maybe at that point, somebody will start from the right thinking they are a credible source. Otherwise, shut up. Nobody trusts you. I mean, you're ridiculous. You're just ridiculous. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit the subscribe.
We did not. I assure you, we did not. I didn't enjoy it, Ben. Go to hell. All right. One more Benny Shapiro.
Here is the actual story, according to NBC News. They're allowed to report it now. It's okay. It's okay, guys. The election's over. They're allowed to now let the light flourish. Here's Darton Newell Clark, Tom Winter, and Mike Memoli reporting. Hunter Biden,
oh my
President-elect Joe
Biden. I can't understand what he's saying.
Son said Wednesday federal officials in Delaware are investigating his taxes. Now, number one, weird that we're finding this out from Hunter Biden, isn't it? Isn't that strange? Like, normally you find this out from leaks via the Justice Department, or maybe from the Justice Department directly. But in this particular case, Hunter Biden is announcing he's under investigation. How strange! Almost as though he is getting special treatment. Hunter Biden said, quote, I learned yesterday for the first time that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware advised my legal counsel also yesterday that they are investigating my tax affairs. I take this matter very seriously, but I am confident a professional and objective review of these matters will demonstrate I handled my affairs legally and appropriately,
Riley.
including with the benefit of professional tax advisors. The U.S. Attorney for Delaware's office declined to comment on an ongoing investigation. This news came weeks after an election campaign in which President Donald Trump and his allies made unfounded and baseless claims of corruption regarding Hunter.
By the way, where is everybody tonight? Usually we're up in like the 40s or 50s by now when it comes to viewership. I guess everyone is out watching Son Soul's on, Prime Kai's on, Lisa's on. I might have to check that out.
Biden and his father. How do you know if they're unfounded and baseless if you refuse to do the basic reporting? NBC News? And what exactly are the unfounded, baseless claims? Would that be that perhaps Joe Biden knew about what his son was doing? Because that was not unfounded and baseless. I mean, that's exactly what Hunter Biden's business partner, Tony Bobulinski, was saying publicly. That was not unfounded and baseless. But the media treated it as unfounded and baseless because they obviously have a dog in this fight. They alleged that Hunter Biden used his father's influence to enrich himself through business deals in Ukraine and China, and that his father not only facilitated, but that he may have benefited financially. Trump provided no evidence for these claims. Okay, even in the story, you can see the absurd anti-factual bias. They allege Hunter Biden used his father's influence to enrich himself through business deals in Ukraine. They didn't allege that. Hunter Biden overtly admitted that in a public interview on national television. They asked Hunter Biden, would you have gotten a job on the Burisma board, having no experience in natural oil or gas or Ukraine, if your dad's name weren't Biden? And he said, absolutely not.
Yeah. Would Donald Trump's kids have gotten a job in the Donald Trump administration if their last names weren't Trump or they weren't married to someone named Trump? Absolutely not. Ivanka Trump has no experience doing what she's been doing. Fucking Jared Kushner got put in charge of bringing peace to the Middle East, got put in charge of ending the opioid crisis, got put in charge of all kinds of things that he is in no way qualified to actually be doing. Goodness. People all the time get positions that they are not qualified for. Like, again, this is part of, like, the conservative, like, idea of there being a meritocracy. This is kind of why it's absolutely not true. People all the time in upper class society get put in positions they have no skill set for. Absolutely none. Absolutely none.
Of course he was using his father's influence. Of course he was doing all of these things. We know that there are companies founded, and in their founding documents it talked about using Hunter Biden's influence with daddy and in Washington, D.C. We know that is the case because we have seen the documents. And now we are being told by NBC News that the Trump campaign was making those baseless allegations. They weren't baseless. You guys just didn't want to investigate them. You didn't want to report them. You still don't want to report them.
Well, then why isn't Bill Barr investigating Hunter Biden? You know, the president has the ability to investigate people and to, you know, the Justice Department has the ability to do these investigations and bring people before a court of law if they're suspected of breaking the law.
That's not an allegation that he used his dad's name to get rich in Ukraine. That is an actual fact that he has admitted to. However, says NBC News, Hunter and his ex-wife Kathleen Buell had an Internal Revenue Service lien against them for taxes not paid, possibly including interest and penalties totaling $112,000 until this past March, according to publicly available documents. The documents filed by the IRS show the tax lien was placed on Hunter and Buell in November of 2019. It is not immediately clear if the lien has anything to do with the investigation. The Biden team then put out this pathetic statement, quote, President-elect Biden is deeply proud of his son, who has fought through difficult challenges, including the vicious personal attacks of recent months, only to emerge stronger. Well, listen, he's a good dad. He's got a right to be proud of his son. I'm not sure what about Hunter Biden would make you proud. It's not like there's a lot there that would make you proud of Hunter. But with that said,
this coming from a man who's described his own child as fucking idiots and basically subhuman because they're like 5 years old. Like, what is there to be proud of your child about? I don't know. Overcoming a drug addiction seems like a pretty big thing to be proud of your kid for, you know? Howdo, we watched a video a while back of Ben Shapiro reviewing Anti-Racist Baby. It's in the highlights somewhere on my channel. You can find it if you want. But basically, he shit talks the ability of children to understand things. I don't think anyone has the link handy. I certainly don't, but you can find it yourself if you go through the highlights down below.
Said the idea that these were vicious personal attacks. Nope, that's just called reporting. Especially when it turns out that the entire Biden clan, and this has been widely reported everywhere from the left to the right, including a big New Yorker story just a couple of years ago, the entire Biden clan has used its influence and its and daddy's name in order to get rich.
Donald Trump literally makes his money by printing his name on the side of buildings. What? That's his entire company. That's where all the wealth of the Trumps come from. What the fuck are you talking about? Also, again, like, if any of this was illegal, then it should be really easy for them to prove it in court. So that begs the question, not why isn't the media investigating this? Why isn't it being brought into court? Why hasn't the Trump administration brought it into court? If it's so obvious that there are illegal things going on, it should be real easy. It should be real easy for them to prove it in court. That would have been a real big win for the Trump administration prior to the election. In Ukraine, it is. I'll find it in sub when I get a minute. Is it under the same username? It is Radical Maniac. It is. In Ukraine it is. Yeah, but again, if it's easy to prove in court, it should be real easy to prove in court in the United States.
Hey, that is unchallengeable.
Just because it happened doesn't mean it's easy to prove in court, though. OJ was acquitted, remember? Yeah. But again, he was able to get off because he was able to put up a good legal argument that convinced the jury. Again, if it's as easy as Ben Shapiro is saying it is, then he should be able to prove it here. That's not how what works. Like, what do you want to have happen? Well, Donald Trump is rich as fuck too. What is your argument? Rich people can be brought to justice. They can be brought to court. The law in the Ukraine is not the same as in North America. Well, yeah. So, I guess, like, are you saying he broke the law in Ukraine? If so, I don't know how that matters in the United States. Okay, well, how does that matter if he lives in the United States? What? Since when do people in the US care about breaking other people's laws? I was shocked when Weinstein went to prison, yeah. North America under Obama got a lot of oil, so you are right. I guess I'm very confused about your point, How, though.
Now, it turns out there's even more to the story. So CNN, now they're allowed to investigate, right? CNN's allowed to cover this now. So after months of suggesting that any questions about Hunter Biden were simply made up and we should just ignore them because it was a distraction from Trump's threat to democracy. Blah, blah. Now we've got Evan Perez and Pamela Brown at CNN reporting. After going quiet in the months before the election, federal authorities are now actively investigating the business dealings of Hunter Biden. A person with knowledge of the probe said his father, President-elect Joe Biden, is not implicated. Now that the election is over, the investigation is entering a new phase. Federal prosecutors in Delaware, working with the IRS Criminal Investigation Agency and the FBI, are taking overt steps, such as issuing subpoenas and seeking interviews, the person with knowledge said. Now, I have a question. Why did they wait until the election was over? Why? Seriously, what is the rationale? Because they wanted Joe Biden to win. End of story. That's all. Typically, legal investigations do not get held up contingent on the person's proximity to an election. That's insane. That's an insane act of corruption. Do you understand how crazy that is? That if you had prosecutors who are on the trail of a candidate or a candidate's family member, and they decided, you know what, we're putting this off until after the election because we just don't want to interfere in the election. That is election interference. That's election interference. If Ivanka Trump had committed a crime and she were under investigation, and the Fed said, you know what, there's an election coming up. We're just going to put this thing off until like just after the election. That would be election interference. The same is obviously true of Hunter Biden. In the first 3 paragraphs of the CNN story, they mentioned the election 3 times. 3 times in 3 paragraphs, the relevance of the election. Quote, activity in the investigation had gone covert in recent months due to Justice Department guidelines prohibiting overt actions that could affect an election, the person said. So first of all, if there are actual guidelines from the Justice Department saying you can't take overt action, meaning you can't take perfectly legal action because it might affect an election, that affects an election. What actually happened here is members of the DOJ decided that they didn't want to get caught in the James Comey trap of 2016, having to publicly investigate one of the candidates or a family member of the candidates. They didn't want the heat. They didn't want all of the rage brought about.
Damn, this really sounds like a failure of the Trump administration, doesn't it? Who had control over a lot of this.
And so they said, you know what, we're going to bury this until after the election. And the media did the exact same thing. We're not going to cover this until after the election. And now the election is over. And guess what? Now the DOJ can move forward. And we're supposed to trust the media, and we're supposed to trust these legal institutions that apparently are dedicated to not affecting an election by directly impacting an election. This is all madness. This is all madness. And then you wonder why there are conspiracy theories blooming. You wonder why people are suspicious of election fraud. You wonder why people don't trust the system. Maybe because if you don't trust the media or the prism to view the system, and if it turns out that members of the system are engaged in corrupt activities, they were in 2016 with regard to going after Carter Page with a bad FISA warrant, with regard to pumping the Steele dossier through the federal government via a Hillary Clinton law firm. If you don't trust the system because of that, and if you don't trust the system because before the 2020 election, they decided they were not going to investigate Hunter Biden because it was too close to the election, it might be that somebody might draw the perfectly understandable, if incorrect, conclusion that the entire system is just not worth trusting.
You've literally said that the system isn't worth trusting in this video.
How many times can you go back to the well before people say, you know what, we're done? That's one of the things that is happening here. So now CNN contacted Biden's attorney in the campaign this week, seeking comments about the investigation. On Wednesday, they released a statement acknowledging the probe. Okay, so this is the key, right there. Okay, that is the key. It is not that Hunter Biden was the first person to find out about the investigation. CNN knew about the investigation. They say so. They openly admit it in the CNN story. Again, let me read that more slowly. CNN contacted Biden's attorney and the campaign this week, seeking comment about the investigation. On Wednesday, which will be after CNN contacted them, they released a statement acknowledging the probe. Oh, look at that. That means the media, Hunter was not the first to know. The media knew as well. Members of CNN, reportorial gang knew, which means they could have known before the election. Because guess what? This investigation has been ongoing, according to CNN, since 2018. This is madness.
Wait, William of Orange.
We'll get to more of this in just 1 second. If you're not mad, you're not watching. Seriously, you should be pissed. When people talk about rigging the election, people talk about voter fraud or voter irregularity. Yeah. No, the way that you rig an election is by taking the entire media infrastructure, using it as cover for the Democratic candidate, hiding all the information, and then, as we will see, trying to mobilize social media to crack down on anybody who would actually report that information. That's how you rig an election. The way you rig an election is by preventing the American public from seeing information that they need to see, meanwhile focusing all of your ire on one candidate. The media decided this election, period, end of story.
Like every election, Ben? Like, the election is always filtered through media, Ben. What other method would you prefer? Come on now.
That is what happened here. Aided and abetted by people apparently in the Justice Department. I'm not saying the Hunter Biden thing would have swung the election to Trump. I'm saying that there's a consistent pattern of the media refusing to report anything about Joe Biden, anything at all. Okay, and there's a consistent pattern of social media attempting to downgrade information unfavorable toward Democratic candidates. And this has an impact. I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Ben Shapiro.
I did not. All right.